Okay, so today we'll start with our second unit, that is search methodologies. So search methodologies is very important chapter, and you'll get a lot of questions in your right test as well as in your final exams. So we are going to discuss various search methodologies. Some of you have already studied, but we are going to have a different perspective on these different search methodologies. So in this chapter, we are going to study basically three types of search methods. So first one is blind search methods. Second one is informed search methods. Okay, so basically we are going to study two types of search methods. One is blind search methods and informed search methods. So blind search methods are also known as uninformed search methods. In blind search method, what happens is we are going to make use of brute force technique. Okay, so examples for brute force techniques are DFS and BFS, which you have already studied in your algorithm subject. In case of informed search methods, we are going to make use of some sort of heuristics which will help us to examine the search space more efficiently. Then problem solving as a search. So we know that the goal of computer science or goal of any algorithm is to solve the problem. So problem solving is very important, and it is very important aspect of artificial intelligence. Of course, not only artificial intelligence, you take any uh, domain in computing, problem solving is the important aspect. So a problem can be considered to consist of a goal and a set of actions that can be taken to lead to the goal. So whenever you are solving a problem, there are two things. One is the goal and set of actions that can lead to the goal. So at any given time, we consider the state of search space to represent where we have reached as a result of actions we have applied so far. So we know that there are two things whenever we are solving a problem. One is the goal and the steps to reach that goal. Now note here that you are not going to reach to the goal in just one step. There will be intermediate steps. Okay. So whenever you are in one of the intermediate step, so that is known as state of the search space. Okay, say for example there is a problem which needs you to take 10 steps to solve that particular problem. Now if you are at the fifth step, then you have applied 5 steps to reach to the intermediate goal. Okay, so that means you have solved your problem partially. So when you reach your 10th step, that means you have solved your problem completely. Okay, so your fifth step is known as the state of a search space. Okay, so state means you are in between the states. So you are at one of the intermediate steps. Okay, now the starting node or the first step is known as the initial state, and the last step is known as the goal state. Okay, so remaining states 2 to 9, these are known as intermediate states. So in this chapter, as we have seen, the chapter title itself says that search methodologies. So we are going to make use of various search methods in order to get the results. So search is a method that can be used by computers to examine a problem space like this in order to find a goal. Okay, so often we want to find the goal as quickly as possible or without using too many resources. So this should be our goal, that is the response time and the space complexity. Then a problem space can also be considered to be a search space, because in order to solve the problem, we will search the space for a goal state. Okay, so we will continue to use the term search space to describe this concept. Okay. So whenever you are searching for a solution in a problem space, that space is known as search space in simple terms. Now our search methods can be divided into two types. One is data driven search and second one is goal driven search. Okay, in data driven search, what happens, you are going to start from the initial state and you are going to reach to the goal state. Okay, from initial state to the goal state you are going to move in a forward direction. So that's why this is also known as forward chaining. Okay, so you can go for data driven search only when you have some information on hand. Okay, you should have initial information, but you will not be aware of the goals. Okay, say for example, you want to predict the tomorrow's weather. Okay, you don't know what type of weather will be there tomorrow, but on hand you will be having the data of previous days, previous years, previous months. So based on that you are going to perform some sort of prediction. Okay, so in data driven search you have some information initially, and from that information you are going to search and you are going to find out the goal. And note here that whenever you are finding out the goal, there can be more than one goal in case of data driven search or forward chaining. Now on the other hand, there is one more concept called as goal driven search. In case of goal driven search, what happens is you are going to move in a backward direction. That means you know what the goal is, but you don't know the source, you don't know the root cause. So to find out the root cause you move in a backward direction, but you know exactly what is the goal. Okay, so this sort of approach is usually used whenever you know what is the goal, but you don't know the cause or you don't have the information. So here you are going to find out the information from the goal. So the best example is the medical diagnosis. Okay, so you know that there is a there is a goal. For example, you know that person is diabetic, person has a blood pressure. Okay, so you are going to perform diagnostics tests in order to get the information. For example, let's assume that person is diabetic, and when you perform medical diagnosis you will find the information. For example, how much sugar content is there in his blood or in her blood, what is the content of sugar before meal and after 2 hours of meal, right? Then also various other parameters. Okay, so you should know the difference between data driven search and goal driven search, and you should apply appropriate techniques, either data driven or goal driven. So it depends clearly on the problem you are solving. Okay, if the goal is not known but if we have a initial information, then you should go for data driven search. But if you know the goal but if you don't have the information and you want to find out the information from the goal, then you should go for goal driven search. In our syllabus, most of the techniques which we are going to study, they are all data driven search methods. So let us first study the first method, that is the generate and test. It's a blind search method. That means uninformed search methods. Okay, so we don't use any heuristics in order to optimize the search. Okay, So generate and test is a very simple technique and most simplest approach to search. So what it does is it simply involves generating each node in the search space and testing it to see if it is a goal node. If it is, the search has succeeded and need not carry on. Otherwise, the procedure moves on to the next node. So the best example we can take, which you can relate easily, is debugging your programs in the labs or in your exams. Okay, let's assume that you have written a C program and you have compiled it and you have got sequence of errors. Okay, so what you will do there is you are going to address the errors one by one, at least in your initial days of engineering. You were trying to modify the program and see whether errors were reduced, whether the number of errors were reduced. Okay, so this was the approach you had followed. Okay, so you had written a program, compiled it, you got some sequence of errors. So again, go back to the program, modify something, again compile, see whether errors have reduced or increased. Then again, go back to the source code, make some modifications, compile, see the errors. So this is the approach which you had followed. Okay, it's nothing but generate and test approach, and it is a blind search method and also brute force search method. It's also called as brute force search methods. So you already know what do you mean by brute force. You have already studied in your algorithms subject. Okay, so in brute force technique, the method assumes no additional knowledge other than how to traverse the search tree and how to identify leaf nodes and goal nodes, and it will ultimately examine every node in the tree until it finds a goal. Okay, so even the best example is your linear search, right? You have a list of numbers, right? And you have a key element. You are going to match, you are going to check whether key element matches any element in the sequence one by one. Okay, and you are going to carry out this process until the match is found. So brute force technique. On the other hand, you have binary search. Binary search is not brute force technique. Okay, so there you are using some sort of a heuristic. That is, you are dividing the array, finding the middle element and comparing whether it is less than the middle element or greater than the middle element. If it is less than the middle element, then you are searching in the first half, otherwise you are searching it in the later half. So this is how informed search method works. So in case of binary search, whereas linear search is brute force search technique. Okay. Now, to successfully operate generate and test needs to have suitable generator. Okay. Note here that you should have a generator first, right? Then testing comes. So that means you have to write a code for generator. For example, let's assume that you want to generate a random number. Then you are going to write an algorithm to generate the random number. Okay. Now, whenever you are generating any node, it must have three properties. First one is completeness, second one is non-redundancy, and third one is it should be well informed. Okay. So first property says that it must be complete. So by complete we mean it must generate every possible solution. Otherwise, it might miss a suitable solution. Okay. For example, if I am saying that my random number generator should generate 10 random numbers from 1 to 10, that means it should generate all 10 random numbers from 1 to 10. It should generate all numbers from 1 to 10 randomly. Okay, I need 10 unique numbers. but let's assume that it is missing few numbers. Say it may miss 5, it may miss 8. Then it is not a complete solution because it is only generating 8 unique numbers. But I want my random number generator to generate 10 unique numbers from 1 to 10. Okay. The next is it must be non-redundant. Now note here that if it is not complete, then definitely it will be redundant. If it is complete, then yes, you can say that it may be non-redundant, but that is not guaranteed. But if it is not complete, then definitely it will be redundant. Say for example, your random number generator is generating 8 unique random numbers and I want to generate 10 random numbers. So in that case, it will generate 10 random numbers where 2 numbers will be repeated. So that means it is resulting into redundancy. Okay, so I don't want that. So my generator should be non-redundant. That means it should not generate the same solution twice. In case of random number generation, it should not generate duplicate random numbers. It must be well informed. This means that it should only propose suitable solutions and should not examine possible solutions that do not match the search space. That means I don't want irrelevant solutions. Okay, I want only possible solutions. Okay, for example, I want to reach from Belgaum to Bangalore, then I should get a ticket price from Belgaum to Bangalore. I don't want ticket price from Hubli to Bangalore. It should not display that. Okay. So three properties a generator must satisfy: complete, non-redundant, well informed. Once this generator generates the nodes, then you can go for testing whether it is a goal node. If it is a goal node, you can stop there. Otherwise, continue with the generator to generate new nodes. So as I have told you, generator and test is known as a blind search technique because you are not going to use any special knowledge. You are just generating the nodes using brute force technique. So when you use additional information such as heuristics, it is known as informed search method. And also you can call it as intelligent search technique. So in case of finding the contact lens in a football ground example, we have seen three cases where we can call some method as intelligent, right? So we are going to study few search techniques now, and we can discuss which one is intelligent, which one is not intelligent, and how you can make them intelligent search techniques. The first technique is depth first search. You have already studied depth first search in your algorithm subject, but we'll see how it works here. So we'll just quickly recap depth first search. So you can see here, this is figure 4.1. You have a tree diagram here. Starting from root node A, you have to reach goal node J. Okay. So how you will identify goal node J? See the leaf nodes, and one of the leaf nodes is circled using two circles. That means J is circled using two circles. It is double circled here. So your J is a goal node, others are not goal nodes. Okay. Now how are you going to perform depth first search? Starting from root node, you are going to visit all the nodes from the leftmost part of the tree. From the leftmost part of the tree, you are going to move to the rightmost part of the tree till you reach the goal. For example, you are going to start from node A and you are going to reach node J. So you will start from node A. So as I have told you, you have to visit the leftmost part of the tree first. So from A, you will go to B. From B, you will go to D. From D, you will go to G. Now G is the leaf node, so you have to backtrack. So you will backtrack to node D and you will visit the right branch of node D. So in this case, you will visit node H. So now all the nodes from leftmost part of the tree have been visited. Now you have to go to the next branch on the right part of your tree. So for that again you have to backtrack. So now again backtrack to node D. At this level also all the nodes have been visited, so backtrack to B. At B also you have visited all the nodes, so backtrack to A. Now when you backtrack to A, you will see that there are few more nodes to be visited. So from A move to C. Now again from C you should not move to F. So even in the rightmost part, first step is to visit the left part of the tree. Now from C, you can observe that there are two branches again, E and F. So E is on the left side, so visit E first. Then after visiting E, visit I. Then after I backtrack to E, visit J. So J is our goal node, so stop. So this is how depth first search works. Okay. But there is a disadvantage with respect to depth first search. So what if you have infinite depth, or you have depth with say 100 nodes or 200 nodes, and your goal node is again J node. In that case, unnecessarily it will take a lot of time. Okay, so there's a problem with the depth first search. As I have told you, if you have relatively larger depth on the left side or infinite depth, but your goal node is on the other part of the tree, so in that case you will never reach the goal node, or it will take a lot of time to reach the goal node. So if the depth is more, then your DFS will perform worse. Okay. Then there's a practical application where DFS can be applied. So whenever you are searching for files or folders on your computer system, it uses DFS technique. Okay. So first it searches for a particular file in a particular folder. So if it is found there, it will stop. Otherwise, it will go inside folder 1, then inside folder 2, inside folder 3, inside folder 4, and so on. Okay. So that means let's assume that you have folder X. First, it will search in X1, then it will search in X11, then X111, X1111, and so on. Okay. So that is the depth. So also your search engines use technique called as spidering. So even spidering employs the technique of depth first search. Then the next technique is breadth first search, right? So we know the problem with the depth first search now. What if the solution is available on the right part of the tree, but you have relatively larger depth on the left part of the tree? So that's a problem. It will take a lot of time to reach to the goal node, or it will never reach if you have infinite depth. Okay. Now to solve this problem, researchers came up with another technique that is known as breadth first search. So breadth first search works horizontally. It searches the nodes horizontally, whereas depth first search searches the elements vertically. Okay. So how depth first search does? It starts with vertically first, then horizontally. Whereas breadth first search is the reverse way. It first searches horizontally, then it searches for vertical. So again, now let's consider the same example, same tree. Now your goal node is J, whereas your root node is A. Now you have to search from A to J. Now in this case, we are going to search in horizontal direction. So first you will visit A and check whether it is a goal node. It is not a goal node, so you move to the left part of the tree. Then you will visit the B node. Then you will go to the next node on the same level. So in breadth first search, what happens is your tree is divided into levels. Okay, so on level 0 you have the root node, that is A. On level 1 you have two nodes, that is B and C. On level 2 you have three nodes, they are D, E and F. On level 3 you have six nodes, they are G, H, I, J and K, L. So you are going to visit the nodes level by level. Okay, so that means you will first visit all nodes from left to right direction in level 0. Then you will go to level 1, you will visit all the nodes again in left to right direction. Then you will go to level 3. In level 3 also you will visit all the nodes from left to right. Then you will go to level 4, again you will visit all the nodes from left to right. Okay, so that's why you can also see they are how they are numbered. So on level 0 we have node A, so I will first visit A. In level 1 I have two nodes B and C, so B comes first, C comes later. So from left to right I will visit B, then C. Then I will go to the level 2. On level 2 I will first visit D, then I will visit E, then I will visit F. On level 3 I have few more nodes, again I will start from left. I will visit node G, then I will visit node H, node I, then finally I will stop at node J. Okay, I am not going to visit any further nodes. So this is how breadth first search works. Now breadth first search also has some problem. The problem is that what if your goal node is present at the extreme right of the tree? Okay, in this case it will result into visiting of most of the nodes or all of the nodes on the tree. So again it's a time consuming process. Okay, then what we have to do is we have to apply some techniques which will optimize both the DFS as well as the DFS. Okay, or you may have to come up with a new technique. Now this is a simple table which explains how DFS performs and how BFS performs in a given scenario. So there are around four scenarios, right? And it explains whether DFS performs badly or performs well. Similarly, whether BFS performs well or performs badly. So the first scenario is that some paths are extremely long or even infinite. So that is the same point which I was discussing just few minutes ago. So if you have infinite depth, okay, so some paths are extremely long means you have infinite depth or relatively longer paths. So in this case, DFS will perform badly, whereas BFS will perform better because depth doesn't matter. Even if you have infinite depth, BFS will give you results. Okay. So note here that even if you have infinite depth, still BFS will give you the result. The next, when all paths are of similar length. Okay. When all paths are of similar length. So for example, if you see our tree which we have used, we had used the same tree for both DFS as well as BFS. In this case, it has almost resulted in same number of steps. Okay, so DFS and BFS both will perform better when you have all paths of similar length. Okay, When I say all paths of similar length, that means let's assume that our goal node is on the leaf nodes and all the leaf nodes are at the same level. The next, all paths are of similar length and all paths lead to goal state. So in this case, DFS will perform better. Why? Because your goal node may be present on the leftmost part of the tree. In that case, your you will get the solution in the first step only. So that means your first path itself is the uh, result, so it will always perform better. Whereas in case of breadth first search, it will always result into waste of time and memory. Okay, because it will result into multiple or more nodes instead of fewer nodes. Then next is high branching factor. Now note here that branching factor affects BFS, but it does not affect much DFS. So if you have a high branching factor, that means each node in a tree has more children. Okay, let's assume that if a particular node has two children, then that node has a branching factor of 2. If a particular node has 5 children, then that particular node has a branching factor of 5. So now in this case, if you are having high branching factor, then breadth first search will perform poorly because it will again result into visiting the nodes unnecessarily from left to right. Okay, so that's why you have to optimize BFS depending on the scenario. You have to optimize DFS depending on the scenario. Okay, so in case of DFS, the performance depends on other factors. Okay, other factors like what is the depth. If depth is also more, then it will definitely perform poor. But if the depth of the tree is less, okay, if you are having relative shorter paths, then you will get better results using depth first search technique. Then let's assume that you have a first depth first search tree and you have infinite paths, or you have relatively longer paths, but your goal node is present on other side of the tree. In that case, what you can do is you can use a parameter called as depth threshold. Okay, you can see that I am going to search only up to this depth level. I am going to search for a tree only up to level 5, only up to level 10. After that, I am going to backtrack and move to the other side of the tree. So in this way, you can optimize DFS. You can avoid visiting all the nodes on the relatively longer paths, which is not at all leading you to the goal node. Okay. When we were students, we had a software called as Microsoft Front Page, or even there are some softwares now also which are used to download the websites. Okay, we know that larger websites will be having lots of folders and they will be having lots of nested folders also. Okay, so unnecessarily I don't want to download all those things. So what I say is I will fix the nesting level as 5. Okay, that means only up to level 5 all data will be downloaded. Even if you are having hundreds of folders with hundreds of nesting levels, after level 5 all those files will be ignored. So in this way I will be able to download the entire website in a relatively shorter amount of time. Okay, so this is how your depth threshold works. Okay, let's assume that you have a tree of depth 100, but your solution is present on the right side of the tree, so you need not have to visit all those 100 levels. Okay, you may set the depth threshold at 20, at 10, at 30. Okay, so once you reach that level and you are not finding the solution, backtrack. Okay, and move to the right side of the tree. So in this way you will avoid visiting nodes unnecessarily. Now your search methods have some properties. So we can take 2 to 3 minutes short break, then we'll start again. Okay, let's start with the next topic. So next topic is properties of search methods. So every search method should have these five properties. First one is complexity, second one is completeness, third one is optimality, fourth one is admissibility, and fifth one is irrevocability. Okay. So some of the properties you already know them, some we will discuss. The first important property is complexity. So you have already studied one entire subject with related to complexity. So basically, when we say complexity, we are going to deal with time complexity and space complexity. Space complexity is almost irrelevant now because space is available at a very low cost, and if you go to cloud, then there is actually no limit on the space. So you need not have to worry much about space complexity. In olden days, there were constraints on the space complexity. But now you have algorithms such as big data, which can big data technologies allow you to store data in terms of terabytes and also process the information. So you do not have to worry much about space complexity. But the thing which we will still worry is the time complexity. Okay. So time complexity is a method. Time complexity of a method is related to the length of a time that the method would take to find a goal state. Or in simple terms, it is the amount of time the program takes or the algorithm takes to give you the result. Okay, it may be in terms of milliseconds, seconds, or whatever. Okay, now there are some tools which will help you to uh, identify which statements are taking more time, and once you identify those things, then you can rewrite those statements in such a way that you achieve better time complexity. So those tools are known as profiling tools. Every standard editor has these profiling tools. Even if they are not directly visible, they are available as plugins. Okay. Then there are also benchmark tools. Okay. You can use these tools and you can see how your program is performing, how your algorithm is performing with respect to time complexity. Now it is normal to use big O notation to describe the complexity of a method. For example, breadth first search has a time complexity of big O of b raised to d, where b is the branching factor of the tree and d is the depth of a goal node in a tree. Okay, it is not the depth of other nodes; it is depth of a goal node in a tree. So depth first search may be very efficient in terms of space because it only needs to store information about the path it is currently examining. So it need not have to store the information of other paths. Okay, if that path is leading to the goal node, then yes, you are getting the solution. Otherwise, just forget about that path, then start with a new path. Whereas in case of BFS, it's not the case. Okay, but it is not efficient in time. DFS is not efficient in time because it may end up examining very deep branches of the tree, which is time consuming process. Okay, that means you are unnecessarily visiting very long paths, so which will take a lot of time. Whereas in case of BFS, if the branching factor is more, then it requires more space to store all the nodes. Okay. Now, the last statement is very important here. The complexity must often be weighed against the adequacy of the solution generated by a method. That means a very fast search method might not always find the best solution. Whereas, for example, a search method that examines every possible solution will guarantee to find the best solution, but it will be very inefficient. So you can try to relate these statements with respect to the example which we have taken, that is finding out the contact lens in a football ground. Okay, so the first method was very fast. We just divided the football ground into four parts, but it is highly inefficient. It failed to find out the contact lens. Whereas the second method was very efficient. There it was guaranteed to find out the contact length because we had divided the football ground in terms of pixels and we had performed uh, pixel by pixel search, but it took a lot of time, so that is not acceptable. So in the third solution which was acceptable, what we had done, we had divided the football ground in terms of tiles and we performed tile by tile search. So in that case we had saved a lot of time in searching the contact lens, and also we have saved a lot of space. Okay, so that's what I'm saying, that industries often look for good enough solutions, not the best solution. Okay, if you are getting a solution in a reasonably good amount of time, in reasonably acceptable amount of time, yes, that is fine. Okay, the next is the completeness. A search method is described as complete if it is guaranteed to find a goal state if one exists. So breadth first search is complete, whereas depth first search is not complete, because it may explore a path of infinite length and never find a goal node that exists on the other path. Okay, so here completeness means a search method, if you use a particular search method, then it is guaranteed that you will get a result. Okay, you will reach the goal state. Okay, so BFS is complete, whereas DFS is not complete, because DFS may end up in examining the very long paths or infinite path, whereas even if you are having infinite paths, but if you apply breadth first search, it is guaranteed that you will get a result. Okay. So completeness is usually a desirable property, because running a search method that never finds a solution is not often helpful. On the other hand, it can be the case that searching the entire search tree is not necessary or simply not possible, in which case the method that searches enough of the tree might be good enough. Okay, so a method that is not complete has disadvantage that it cannot necessarily be believed if it reports that no solution exists. Okay, so note here that when you say a particular method is complete, then it must result into a solution. It must reach the goal state. Okay, if there is a goal state. But on the other hand, if you say that there is a method but it is incomplete and it is giving you the result, then that cannot be believed, that cannot be accepted. Okay, then the third property is the optimality. So a search method is optimal if it is guaranteed to find the best solution that exists. Now note here that in a search space, in a problem search space, there can be multiple solutions which can exist. Okay, but all those multiple solutions may not be the best. For example, I want to reach to Bangalore from Belgium, then there are various ways, right? Various paths. Okay, so you have to select the best available path, and there are different modes of transport also. You can go by bike, you can go by walk, you can go by bus, you can go by train, you can go by air, but depending on your goal you should choose the appropriate method. Okay, you should find out the appropriate solution. That is, you have no time, you have urgency to reach Bangalore, and if the flight is available at that time, best is to take the flight. But the flight is available but you can reach faster by car, then you have to take the car. So that is how optimality works. So optimality means you have to find out the best solution in least steps. So when I say best solution, it takes least steps and it results into least cost. So even if the algorithm gives you the optimal solution, but still we cannot say that it can be the efficient, because it may result into other factors. So for example, each method has got its own advantages and disadvantages. So let's again consider the analogy here. So when you want to reach from Belgium to Bangalore, if you have an urgency, then you have to take a flight, as I have said, but it will result into more cost. Whereas you can save cost if you use bus or a train, but it will result into taking more time to reach. Okay, so each method has got its own advantages and disadvantages here. So it is basically contextual. So based on the context, you can decide whether the solution is optimal or non-optimal. So as I have said, uh, in many cases, the word optimal is used to describe the algorithm that finds solution in the quickest possible time, in which case the concept of admissibility is used in place of optimality. An algorithm is then defined as admissible if it is guaranteed to find the best solution. Okay, so when we say that algorithm is optimal, that is, it is giving you a particular algorithm is giving you the best solution in quickest possible time, then we don't use the term optimality there. We call that algorithm admissible. So admissible means it is guaranteed to find the best solution in quickest time. So next uh, property is irrevocability. So methods that use backtracking are described as tentative. Methods that do not use backtracking and which therefore examine just one path are described as irrevocable. That means you are going to traverse a tree, but you are not going to use backtracking method. That means only you are going to use forward chaining. You will never visit another. You will never visit any node twice. Okay, you will visit any node only once. Okay, that is irrevocability. For example, in our first chapter we had designed some uh, goal trees, right? Your decision trees, they are irrevocable trees. Okay, so because we don't backtrack, we just decide on that particular node, yes or no. If it yes, then move to the left part. If no, move to the right part. Okay, in this way we reach to the goal node or we don't reach to the goal node. Okay, but that's how it works. But we never visit any node twice. Okay, so and we are not going to backtrack. So irrevocability means you are not going to traverse backwards, or there is no concept of backtracking used while traversing a tree. So depth first search is an example of tentative search. Okay, because you are going to visit only once every node. So irrevocable search methods will often find suboptimal solutions to problems because they tend to be fooled by local optima solutions that look good locally but are less favorable when compared with other solutions that are more favorable when compared with other solutions that are more favorable. If you are going for a goal node, then again it is, or we may not call it as irrevocable. Next is why humans use depth first search. So you consider any concept in computing, or there are many concepts in computing which humans can relate to their behavior or animal behavior or many things in our nature. Okay, so you consider many, you will see or you will observe many concepts which are related to our surroundings. Okay, for example, cloud computing, we say cloud, right, terms. Then when we get errors, we say that we have got bugs, right? So similarly, there are many algorithms which are inspired by the behaviors of humans, animals, and things in nature, and so on. Okay, so why humans use depth first is that is our natural way of searching the things. Okay, so the best way to start contributing or start implementing algorithms is see how a person behaves in a particular scenario and implement that method first. Then you can start working on the optimality and other concepts. So as I have told you, why depth first search is used by humans is because that's the natural way how humans use to find out the solution. So the first example what we can consider here is the traversing the maze. Okay, so let's look at the diagram here. Okay, yeah. So this is a maze and you have to find out the exit point. So A is the entry point and M is the exit point. Now if any humans enters into the maze, then he will start visiting the entry points. He will start visiting the points and checks whether it is an exit point. If it is an exit point, he will simply exit, otherwise he will just come back. And again he will follow some sort of chronological ordering, so let's say for example, if I start with A, then I will move to B, then I will move to F, then I will go to F, then I'm not able to exit, I will come back, I will go to C, then from C I will go to D, then from D I will go to G, then from G I will go to H, then I will go to I, yes, I will go to I, from I will go to J, then from J I will go to K, K to L, L to M. So I will not visit N because the at the point I see M, I will just go out because that's my exit point. Okay. Although there is a path to N, still, since I have already found out the exit point, I will just go out. So I am not going to visit N. So this is the natural way how humans use to come out from a maze. Now this is a problem, and the next thing is to represent this maze into appropriate knowledge representation method. So now let's represent this maze in the form of a tree. So let's consider the entry points, and entry points has to be denoted as the nodes in a tree. Now our entry point is A, so A should be at the root node. Then our exit point is M, so M should be at the leaf node. Okay. So A is our entry point, so A should be at the root node. M is our exit point, so M should be at the leaf node. So similarly, other exit point should be at the leaf node. Now from A, if you observe, then there are three destinations. Either I can go to B from, or I can go to C, or I can go to D. So three possibilities are there. So in chronological ordering, you can write B first, then C, then D. Now note here that from C there is no path, so I cannot go further. So it stops there. Whereas if I visit B, then there are two choices, E and F. Okay, so again in chronological order, add E and F as a children to node B. Then when you visit node D, then there are again three possibilities. Either you can visit G, H, or I. So add G, H, and I as the children of node D. Now again, your H and G, they don't have any further paths to explore, so stop there. Now again, visit I. So when you visit I, then there are two possibilities. They are J and K. So from there you cannot go further, so stop there. Now go to K. Now when you come to K, you have three possibilities. So they are L, M, and N. So M is your exit point, so you can also mark M in double circle. Now the second example which relates to our natural way of searching is searching for a gift. Now let's assume that you had visited a street where you have got number of shops where gifts are available or where you can buy gifts. Then each shop has multiple floors. Okay, floor 1, floor 2, floor 3. Now if we apply, if we use breadth first search here, then what I will do here is I will go to shop 1. That means I will visit first floors of all shops first, then I will visit second floors of all shops, then I will visit third floors of all shops. Okay, it is highly impractical example. Okay, we don't search floor by floor. Actually we finish shopping shop by shop. Okay, that is the depth first search. How depth first search works is you visit the first shop, then you visit the first floor, search for items there, then you go to the second floor, search for items there, then you go for the third floor, you search for the items there. If you don't find, then again go to the next shop, next shops, first floor, second floor, third floor, then go to the third shop, first floor, second floor, third floor. This is how depth first search works. Okay, so depth first search, if you see, it is how we humans work. Okay, so whereas breadth first search is highly impractical in real life. If you consider this example here, because we never visit only first floor or only particular floor of all the shops, then again we don't visit uh, second floor of all shops, right? It is impractical. So that's why depth first search is more closer to our real life. But in case of computing, it can give you the better results because of some scenarios like infinite path or relatively longer paths. Now implementing depth first search and breadth first search. Now let's see how we can implement DFS and BFS. Now if you observe the source code, we are going to use a data structure called as queue. So you already know how queue works, right? So you are going to insert the elements from the rear end and remove the element from the front end. But here the queue which we are going to use, it's a special queue. That is, we are going to use the concept of DQ. That means you can add or remove elements from both the ends. That means I can add or remove the elements from the front of the queue, or I can add or remove the elements from the back of the queue. Okay, so if you consider the implementation, if you observe the source code here or pseudocode here, which I'm going to display now, you will see that most of the part of the DFS and BFS is identical. Okay, only there are small changes which we are going to perform, okay, to implement DFS or BFS. Now let's see the source code of DFS here. So it's a non-recursive version. Of course, there is a recursive version also. So we'll not discuss recursive version. So you can go through recursive version after this class. So let's see the function depth, how it works. You have the first statement q, which is the empty queue, where we have just initialized the queue. So that means we have created an empty queue at this point. Then you declare a variable called as state and assign a root node to it. That means you should define the starting point, okay, for traversing a tree. Then write a loop. So while true, inside a loop, check if it is a goal state. If it is a goal state, then return success. Stop there. Okay. If it is not a goal state, then add this state. Okay. Then if it is not a goal state, then you should add successors of state to the front of the queue. So successors means children of queue. For example, if we have assigned root node now, right? So if root node is not a goal node, then root node will be having children nodes. So you have to add those children nodes to the front of the queue. Okay. Now check if the queue is empty. If the queue is empty, then report failure. Okay. Then assign state is equal to queue of 0. That means you have to change the state now. Earlier it was root node. Okay, now you have to visit the next node in the tree. So in that case, and that to leftmost part of the tree. So the first node of the uh, queue, first element of the queue is assigned as a state. Okay, so always the first item in the queue will be assigned as the state. Then remove the first item from the queue. Okay, again repeat the steps. So till you find the goal state or till you report failure. Okay, now you see here what we are doing here. In case of depth first search, we are adding successors of a node to the front of the queue. Okay, we are adding successors of a node to the front of the queue. Now then afterwards we are removing the item from the queue. Now let's see the implementation of breadth first search, how it works. Okay. Now in breadth first search, everything remains same. You can see here function breadth, queue is initialized to empty queue, then root node is assigned as the state, then while true, then check if it is a goal state. Else in breadth first search, what you have to do is you have to add successors of a state or successors of a node to the back of the queue. Okay, in case of depth first search, what you had done, you had added them to front of the queue. In breadth first search, you just need to add them to the back of the queue. Only this is the difference in implementation. Otherwise, all statements remain same. Okay. Otherwise, all these statements remain same. Only this is the difference between depth first search and breadth first search. In depth first search, we add the successors of a node to the front of the queue. In a breadth first search, we add successors of the node to the back of the queue. And all the remaining statements are same. Now what you need to do now is you need to draw this diagram, draw this tree. That is figure 4.4. Yes. So this figure you should consider and apply DFS and BFS algorithm. So you just saw the source code, right? Pseudo code, right? So that pseudo code you should apply on this tree. Now how you should be doing is there's a tracing given here. And see that you will get such questions in your similar questions in your final exam. You will get similar questions in your IIT tests. where a tree will be given to you, and you need to apply DFS or BFS or whatever algorithm, and find out and write the analysis of that particular tree using the given algorithm. Okay, now you should make four columns here. So first column is the step, second column is the state, third column is the queue, fourth column is the nodes. So in notes, you are going to just write the description of that particular statement, what is happening there. Now, if you draw the figure 4.4 here, so you can see here A is at the root node, B and C are the children of node A. So let's see how they are represented here. So when you apply the algorithm, you see here that we have assigned root node as a first state in our first step. So you can see here instead we have written A, and at this is the initial state. At the initial state you will be having A in state, your queue will be empty, right? So that's why the description is written. The queue starts out empty and the initial state is the root node, which is A. Now A is not a goal node, right? So what we have done, we have added successors of node A. So successors of node A are B and C. Okay, we have added them to the front of the queue. Okay, now after adding to the front of the queue, then we are removing the first element from the queue in third step. So first element is nothing but B. Okay, then we are checking whether B is the root node. B is not B, we are checking whether B is the goal node. Okay, B is not a goal node, but B has two children, D and E. You can observe it in this diagram. Okay, so you can see here B has two children, D and E. Right, now we have added D and E to the front of the queue. Okay, so you can see here in fourth step, even though C is there, okay, C will remain as it is, but we have added D and E to the front of the queue. Okay, yes. So we have added D and E to the front of the queue. Then next we are going to again remove the first element from the queue, that is D. Now we are going to check whether D is the goal node. D is not a goal node. Okay, when you pop or when you remove D, two items remain in queue, that's E and C, but D is not a goal node. But if you observe the tree here, D has two children, H and I. Okay, so H and I will be added here in the tree. Okay, so getting the point here. Okay. H and I are children or successor nodes of node D, so H and I are added. So you remove H now because it is the first element in the queue. But H is not a goal node and also it doesn't have any children. Okay. So you are going to continue tracing and you are going to remove the next element in the queue. Right. You are going to remove I. Right. So when you remove I, you are going to check, are there any elements? Are there any successors to node I? So there are no successors, so you continue removing next node. Okay, that is you remove uh, node E now, right? When you reach node E, you will find here that node has two successors, they are J and K. So now add J and K to the tree, J and K to the queue. Okay, and J and Q are added to the front of the queue. Okay, so you can see a J and K are added to the front of the queue in the 10th step. Okay, so at 10th step, the state of the queue is J, K, and C. So it has got three elements. Now remove J. When you remove J, K, and C are remaining, but J is also not a goal node. Okay, so remove K. So K is also not a goal node. Okay, so what remains? C. So now also remove C. So once you remove C, C is empty, Q is empty. Okay, now let's see where our C is. Yeah, C is on the right part. Okay, but C has children. C has no goal. C is not a goal node, but C has children. They are F and G. So add F and G here. Okay. Now F is the first element in the queue, so remove F. So what remains in the queue? G. Check whether F is a goal node. F is not a goal node, but F has two successors L and M. So add them to the front of the queue. So now state of the queue is L, M, and G. Okay. Now finally L is our first element. So remove L. Check if it is a goal node. Yes, L is a goal node. Success. So stop there. So what remains in the queue? M and G remains in the queue. So we had applied DFS on the given tree. Now let's apply BFS on the given tree, and then we can stop our today's lecture. So again, we are applying it on the same tree. Okay, at the first step, our initial states are given. Okay, state is A, Q is empty. So that's a starting point. A is not a goal node, but A has got two children. So add them to the back of the queue. Okay, so you will observe here that first few steps are same. Okay, first three steps are same, but from fourth step onwards, you will start finding out the difference. Okay, now but A has got two children, B and C, add them to the queue. Okay, we are note here that we are adding uh, at the back of the queue. Okay, now B is the first element, so remove it and check whether it is a goal node. It is not a goal node, but it has got two children, C and D. uh, it has got two children, D and E. Note here that instead of adding them to the front of the queue, we are adding them after the queue. So that's why in this tracing you can see here that D and E are appearing after C, whereas in the previous table D and E were appearing before C. Okay, so now uh, C is your first element, so check whether C is the goal node. C is not the goal node. Now add the successors of node C. So successors of node C are F and G. Okay. Now note here that D and E are already added. Now I'm going to add F and G. So F and G will be added after D and E. So you can see here in the sixth step, F and G are added after D and E. Now in the next step, your first element D will be removed, and we are going to check whether it is a goal node. No, it is not a goal node, right? So what we are going to do is we are going to add the children of node D, that is H and I. So H and I will be added at the back of the queue, not at the front of the queue. Okay. So now next, the first element is E. So check whether E is the uh, goal node. E is not a goal node, so add its successors. That is, they are J and K. Now check whether F is the goal node, because that was the first element and it was removed. So F is not a goal node. Okay, but F has got two children, L and M. So add them at the back of the queue. Now next, remove element G. Then check whether G is the goal node. G is not a goal node, but G has got two successors, N and O. So add them to the back of the queue. Now check H, whether H is the goal node. H is not a goal node, but H is at the leaf node. So you can't add any successors here. So just remove H. Then after that, remove I. So all these nodes are leaf nodes only. So you just need to pop out and check whether uh, removed element is goal node. Okay, now when we reach I has no successors, it will be removed, and it's also not a goal node. So again we are going to proceed. We'll check with J is removed. We are going to check whether J is a goal node. J is not goal node. So just ignore it. Then next remove k node, then next remove node L. So when we remove node L, check whether L is a goal state. Yes, L is a goal state. Stop there. Okay. So the only difference in tracing is that in depth first search we were adding the elements to the front of the queue. In breadth first search we were adding the elements at the back of the queue. So we can stop our lecture today. Then we'll discuss some examples. We have seen some scenarios where the first search can perform better and where it can perform worse. Similarly, we have seen scenarios where BFS can perform better and it can perform worse. We have also seen the implementation. So in the next class, uh, we will discuss a method which uses the merits of both and how it achieves better results. Okay, so we will stop today's lecture. Thank you everyone.